Yesterday. You must have overheard our conversation. My husband's eldest brother and his wife are returning home for the birth of their first child. Because of this, my mother-in-law has asked me to clear out my belongings and move them outside. She pointed out that since I can't have children and haven't been involved in supporting my brother-in-law's business, the least I could do is free up some space in the house. Adding to the complexity, I've been paying a substantial rent of $12,000, which makes this situation even more challenging to digest. Living with my mother-in-law, my husband, his brother, and sister-in-law has turned our home into a hotspot of tensions. I've always strived to maintain harmony and keep the household running smoothly, but the constant challenges are becoming overwhelming. Feeling defeated, I agreed to leave but mentioned that I couldn't just leave my things outside. I would return for them later. My mother-in-law seemed relieved by my decision to leave, seemingly indifferent to the inconvenience it caused me. So, I began packing my belongings, and, moments after leaving the house, I called a junk removal service to help manage my belongings. It was a pivotal moment of action for me, moving forward without looking back. My name is Patricia, a 35-year-old IT consultant. My husband, Matthew, 36-year-old, owns 5 restaurants. Despite our age, we're actually newlyweds, having spent most of our lives focused on our careers. People often mistake us for having been married with children for years, but in reality, we only found each other right before turning 35. Our meeting was serendipitous, occurring during a visit to one of Matthew's restaurants, which I decided to visit as a treat to myself after a long day. The place was inviting, especially for someone like me, who often dines alone. Matthew's warm welcome made me a regular, and our conversations began to extend beyond casual small talk. Our discussions often revolved around our work. I shared insights about IT solutions for businesses, including a tablet-based ordering system that could benefit his restaurants. Despite the cost being a stretch for a small business, Matthew was always eager to learn and see how new technologies could be applied. This mutual respect for each other's dedication to work drew us closer, and eventually, we found ourselves in a relationship that led to marriage. This story of unexpected turns and new beginnings highlights the complexities of family dynamics, the challenges of blending personal and professional life, and the surprising paths love can take. In the midst of my hectic work schedule, my husband proposed we go out for dinner one day. The opportunity to share a meal outside with him, a restaurateur, filled me with excitement, and I happily accepted. The idea of being asked out by my husband was delightful, yet at nearly 35, I felt a bit self-conscious about expressing my excitement too girishly. However, this dinner invitation wasn't a one-time occurrence. My husband kept asking me out for meals regularly. It's quite common for men and women who spend a lot of time dining together to eventually find themselves in a romantic relationship. That's exactly what happened with us. After dating for 3 years, as we approached the age of 36, we decided to tie the knot. The thought of being a bride at 35 made me a bit shy, so I suggested to my husband that we skip a traditional wedding ceremony and instead just dress up for some photos together. Post-marriage, I moved into my husband's home, a spacious 4-story house with a garden and parking, situated in a prestigious neighborhood. The rent was steep, around $12,000. Living with a mother-in-law immediately after getting married might seem daunting to some, but at 35, I was not overly concerned. Plus, my mother-in-law was 73, and with my father-in-law no longer with us, it seemed like a practical arrangement. My husband's suggestion to live with his mother was met with my immediate agreement, though I soon began to question that decision. Once I settled in, I noticed the house was exceptionally large, with numerous spare rooms beyond our bedroom and an office space designated for me. Curious, I asked my husband why we needed such a vast space for him and his mother. He explained that he has an older brother, Jason, who became estranged from the family, moving from job to job and place to place. My husband harbored a hope that one day Jason might return, hence the need for a larger home. As he unpacked and arranged my books, the spoke of Jason with a smile, showing no judgment towards his brother's unsettled lifestyle. My mother-in-law, however, seemed less forgiving. Her sudden appearance in the doorway of my new office, checking in on us, revealed her cooler feelings towards her eldest son. It's understandable for a mother to have a complex reaction to a son who avoids his responsibilities. Yet I couldn't help but worry about potential future conflicts between my husband and his mother over Jason. Despite her cool demeanor, my husband urged his mother to accept the new living arrangement, emphasizing that it was important to start off on the right foot now that we were all living together. As she walked away, the sound of her slippers echoed, marking the beginning of our new life together under one roof. Apologizing for the tension, I reassured my husband that I would make an effort to bond with his mother as we continued to share our lives. Grabbing a book from his momentarily still hands, I placed it on the shelf, pondering over the silent judgment I felt from her regarding my age. At 35, the possibility of having children isn't out of the question, but it seems to hang in the air as a difficult prospect. Given that Matthew's elder brother, Jason, is also unmarried without children, I sensed a disappointment in my mother-in-law, fearing she might never experience being a grandmother. In her eyes, Jason's avoidance of traditional responsibilities and my own perceived inadequacies as a wife placed us in a similar light. While I empathize with her desires, changing my age or our circumstances is beyond my control. As we settled into married life, my mother-in-law's indifference towards me became more apparent. She often ignored my attempts at conversation, choosing to keep her distance. It was a lonely feeling, yet devoid of outright hostility. I clung to hope that our relationship might improve over time. However, my immediate concern shifted towards Matthew and the challenges he faced with his business. The financial strain was evident. Soaring prices and dwindling customer spending threatened the survival of his restaurants. Nearly a year into our marriage, the closure of one of his stores underscored the severity of the situation, casting a shadow of distress not just over Matthew, but our household. My mother-in-law's critique of my role, or perceived lack thereof, in supporting Matthew's business only added to the tension. Her harsh words, aimed at questioning my commitment as a wife, echoed with a blend of disappointment and accusation. Despite the sting, I chose to interpret her criticism constructively, focusing on bolstering Matthew's spirits and supporting him through this tumultuous period. Miraculously, 2 years later, Matthew managed to navigate the crisis, keeping our financial ship afloat without the need to close another store. This victory, however, was bittersweet. My mother-in-law's increased hostility, now unbridled, marked a deteriorating relationship on the home front, despite the business's recovery. Ironically, as Matthew's business began to stabilize, new troubles emerged. Whispers of his infidelity reached me, a blow that questioned the foundation of our trust. The notion that he might squander our newfound financial stability on an affair was both baffling and deeply hurtful. It seemed as though when one challenge was overcome, another swiftly took its place, a cycle all too familiar in our journey together. This series of events, a test of resilience in the face of personal and professional trials, underscored the complexity of navigating marriage, family dynamics, and the unpredictable nature of life itself. Despite the turmoil, the experience taught me the importance of patience, understanding, and the relentless pursuit of harmony within the tapestry of relationships that define our lives. I never imagined I'd find myself in such a situation, yet here I was, grappling with an unexpected turn of events. Matthew's brother, Jason, called to share some surprising news. His girlfriend, a 30-year-old woman who worked at the same bar as Matthew, was pregnant. This news brought a mix of emotions. While it was a happy occasion, it also came with its own set of challenges. Jason and his girlfriend, both freelancers, were facing the difficulties of impending parenthood without a stable income. They reached out, hoping to move into our spacious home and seeking employment at Matthew's restaurant. As I was trying to process how to address the rumors of Matthew's affair, my mother-in-law entered the scene, discussing Jason, someone I had yet to meet. I felt like an outsider in my own home as they talked, witnessing a peculiar change in my mother-in-law's attitude towards Jason. Previously critical of him for not living up to his responsibilities, she now seemed eager to welcome him back, all because of the grandchild on the way. This sudden shift in her stance from disdain to support was stark. Matthew, who had always had a soft spot for Jason, seemed caught in the middle of his family's expectations and the reality of our living situation, from my vantage point in the dining room. I watched Matthew, noticing his troubled look as he met my gaze. The conversation around welcoming Jason and his growing family into our home was met with a mix of resignation and acceptance from Matthew. Despite my hopes that he might assert himself, it became clear that he was struggling to refuse his mother's request. His frequent glances in my direction told me he was concerned about how I was taking all this in. The complexity of my situation, dealing with my deteriorating relationship with my mother-in-law, the strain of Matthew's affair, and now the prospect of living with Jason and his family, felt overwhelming. Choosing to set aside these troubles for the night, I went to bed, hoping for a respite from the stress. The next day, a holiday, allowed me the luxury of sleeping in, a rare moment of peace amidst the turmoil. With Matthew at work, I braced myself for an encounter with my mother-in-law, expecting her usual critiques. Yet, what she said next took me by surprise, far surpassing my worst expectations. She bluntly instructed me to make room for Jason and his family by moving my belongings out, essentially suggesting I either relocate to the yard or leave the house altogether. Her rationale was stark and unforgiving. Since I couldn't have children and wasn't helping with Matthew's business, I should at least clear space for Jason's impending family needs. The logic she presented, that the house's spare rooms should serve as a bedroom and nursery for Jason's family, with my office becoming storage, highlighted her disregard for my place in the home. Despite paying a significant rent of $12,000, it seemed my value in the household had diminished in her eyes, now that the prospect of a grandchild was on the horizon. Faced with such insensitivity and the myriad challenges before me, I felt an overwhelming exhaustion. The realization that my mother-in-law saw no further need for me in the home, coupled with the high rent I was contributing, left me too tired to confront the situation head-on. The complexity of family dynamics, personal grievances, and financial pressures converged into a moment of profound disillusionment, marking a pivotal point in my life and marriage. Seeking peace and a moment of solitude, I found myself sitting quietly in the living room, the only sound being the ticking of the clock. It was time to make a decision, overwhelmed by the complexities of living with my mother-in-law, the impending arrival of Jason and his family, and the unresolved issues with Matthew. I realized that staying was no longer an option for me. I needed to prioritize my well-being and peace of mind over the chaos that had enveloped our home. "I've decided to leave," I announced, determined to escape the suffocating environment. "I'll need to return later for my belongings, as it's impractical to move everything at once." My mother-in-law's response, a simple nod of approval, did little to acknowledge the magnitude of my decision. Without further discussion, I began packing my essentials, stepping out of the house within moments. The first action I took was to contact a junk removal service, a clear indication of my resolve to move on and leave the past behind. In the immediate aftermath, I sought refuge in a hotel, allowing myself the space and time to process the change. 3 weeks later, I found myself settling into a new apartment, embracing the solitude and the fresh start it represented. Matthew had not reached out during this time, perhaps under the mistaken belief that my departure was temporary. The silence was broken when Matthew, caught off guard by the unexpected closure of his restaurant, reached out. He was unaware that I had initiated the process of removing the restaurant's equipment and furnishings, a decision that left him bewildered and in search of answers. Upon my return to the house to clarify the situation, I was met with chaos and confusion. Matthew, my mother-in-law, Jason and his wife were all present, each grappling with the implications of my actions. My mother-in-law's anger was palpable, her accusations sharp. Yet, the truth of the matter was far more complex than they realized. Matthew had yet to disclose the full extent of my involvement with the restaurant. Over the years, I had invested significantly in the business, contributing $350,000 to Revitalize, the struggling second branch. This investment was not merely a loan to my husband. It was a strategic decision that led me to become the owner of that branch. My financial contribution had transformed the restaurant, yet this aspect of our partnership was unknown to my mother-in-law and the others. As I explained the situation, revealing the depth of my commitment and the nature of my investment, the room fell silent. The revelation that I was, in fact, the owner of the restaurant branch they had assumed was solely Matthew's, shifted the dynamics of the conversation. My decision to remove the equipment, a move prompted by the need to assert my independence and address the ongoing challenges in our marriage, was not an act of spite, but a step towards reclaiming my agency. In this moment of revelation, the complexities of our intertwined lives came into sharp focus. The path forward was uncertain, yet it was clear that the decisions made and the actions taken were driven by a deeper quest for autonomy, respect, and the pursuit of personal fulfillment amidst the tangled web of family obligations and expectations. I had always let Matthew handle the day-to-day operations of our restaurant, leaving me with little to oversee as its owner. The only significant shift occurred when Matthew redirected his attention towards revitalizing the struggling second branch, a move necessitated by the restaurant's dire financial straits. Amidst this crisis, I felt compelled to offer my support, especially after my mother-in-law criticized me for seemingly lacking faith in Matthew. My commitment took the form of a substantial financial contribution, utilizing the savings I had accumulated during my years of singlehood. "Is this really true?" my mother-in-law asked in disbelief after Matthew confirmed my financial support and ownership stake in the restaurant. "Yes, it's true," Matthew admitted. "Patricia told me it was okay to take the risk with the $350,000 she provided. She was prepared for the possibility of failure, suggesting that if the venture was doomed, she should at least own the restaurant. This way, any income generated could directly benefit her, and she would have the final say in the restaurant's future." The room was filled with skepticism until I laid out the documents that confirmed my ownership: the business license, the transfer of rights agreement, and the lease agreement, all bearing my name. My mother-in-law, visibly shocked, turned red as she scrutinized the documents. "Why didn't you mention this earlier?" she demanded. I explained that Matthew and I had always projected confidence in the restaurant's recovery, especially before we were married. Matthew felt immense pressure to live up to these expectations, not wanting to let anyone down, particularly his mother. I noted how her stern demeanor towards those who didn't meet her standards, like Jason and myself, made it difficult for Matthew to be upfront about the financial help he received from me. "People like my mother-in-law may not realize the weight of their words," I continued. "What seems like minor comments to them can feel like enormous pressure to the person on the receiving end." Matthew was wary of disappointing her or facing her complaints, which is why we kept this arrangement between us. Matthew then took responsibility for the situation, apologizing for not being more transparent and decisive. He acknowledged that if he had managed the restaurant better from the outset, my financial intervention wouldn't have been necessary. Regarding the restaurant staff and the impending closure, I reassured everyone that I had already communicated the situation to them. Utilizing my IT consulting connections, I managed to arrange alternative part-time positions for those interested. This revelation led to a moment of reflection for my mother-in-law, who then offered her apologies to both Matthew and me. She recognized the undue pressure she had placed on us and promised a change in her approach. In the end, Matthew and my mother-in-law's apologies seemed to signal a turning point, suggesting a path towards resolution and understanding within our family. The conversations that day laid bare the complexities and challenges we faced, but also opened the door to a more honest and supportive future together. Despite the seeming move towards resolution, I felt far from content. The air was thick with tension as I clarified that our issues were far from resolved. The moment I laid the divorce papers on the table, the room fell into a stunned silence. Matthew, visibly shocked, struggled to grasp the reality of the situation, questioning the need for such a drastic step amidst what he presumed was a path to reconciliation. "Don't jump to conclusions about us reconciling," I countered, addressing the elephant in the room: Matthew's affair with a part-time employee. Matthew attempted to dismiss the accusation as mere rumor, demanding proof before any such claim could be taken seriously. In response, I presented a photo on my smartphone, irrefutable evidence of Matthew's indiscretion, sent to me by one of the part-time workers. The image captured Matthew and his paramour entering a hotel, a testament to the whispers that had circulated among the staff. This revelation was the culmination of numerous visits to the restaurant, during which concerned employees shared their discomfort about Matthew's behavior. Their willingness to support me by providing evidence and maintaining discretion about the restaurant's impending closure underscored the gravity of the situation. The conversation then shifted to the financial burdens of our shared life, particularly the rent for our home, which I revealed had been entirely covered by me. As the restaurant's revenue dwindled, my financial contribution had increased to the point where I was responsible for the entire $12,000 monthly rent, a figure that matched my salary, leaving Matthew to manage other household expenses. This disclosure left Matthew and my mother-in-law deflated, their futures uncertain in the face of the restaurant's struggles and the potential loss of their home. Jason and his wife, now caught in the middle of this upheaval, voiced their concerns about their livelihood and living arrangements, having returned with expectations of stability that were quickly unraveling. In the midst of their growing desperation and futile pleas for assistance, I stood firm. My decision to leave, fueled by the betrayal and the burden of resolving Matthew's familial conflicts, was unwavering. I refused to be swayed by Jason's appeals or the chaotic fallout that ensued. With the delivery of the divorce papers and the disclosure of the affair, my role in this tangled web of personal and financial dilemmas had reached its end. I left the house to their disputes, stepping away from the chaos and towards a future unburdened by the weight of Matthew's actions and the complexities of his family dynamics. The evidence of the affair in hand, I walked away, leaving them to navigate the consequences of their choices and the uncertain path that lay ahead. The process of divorcing Matthew unfolded more smoothly than I had anticipated. While I had every right to seek alimony, especially given the affair, my financial independence and desire to sever ties cleanly meant I chose not to pursue any financial compensation. I wanted to move forward with as little connection to my ex-husband and his family as possible. After our separation, Matthew, burdened by financial and emotional strain and no longer able to afford the rent, was forced to leave the house along with his family. The responsibility of caring for his mother became a contentious issue, particularly given that Jason, the eldest son, had returned home without any means to contribute financially. This dispute over familial obligations led to a bitter conflict between the brothers, ultimately fracturing their relationship. Jason and his wife chose to leave, severing ties and leaving Matthew to shoulder the responsibility of caring for their mother. This series of events resulted in a strained living situation for Matthew and his mother. They found themselves in a smaller apartment, a stark contrast to their previous home. The close quarters only highlighted their strained relationship, with silence and awkwardness pervading their daily lives. My decision to end the marriage and reveal the affair inadvertently contributed to the unraveling of their family dynamics. In the aftermath, I focused on closing down the restaurant. Despite the complexities involved, my ownership necessitated that I oversee the process. Fortunately, the equipment and furnishings I had invested in were still relatively new and fetched a good price on the market. With a modest additional investment, I was able to complete the closure of the restaurant. This chapter, albeit brief, provided me with invaluable experience that I believe will enhance my skills and perspectives in my IT consulting career. Reflecting on these events, I've come to embrace my professional life with renewed vigor. The challenges and experiences of owning and closing a restaurant, coupled with the personal trials of my marriage, have reaffirmed my belief in the value of my work. It's clear to me now that my true fulfillment comes not from marriage, but from the achievements and satisfaction found in my career. As I continue on my path, I'm convinced more than ever that dedicating myself to my job is where my heart truly lies.